President Trump's statement on his Truth Social talking about Harvard. So he says via his Truth Social, the Harvard case was just tried in Massachusetts before an Obama-appointed judge. She is a total disaster, which I say even before hearing her ruling. She has systematically taken over the various Harvard cases and is an automatic loss for the people of our country. Harvard has $52 billion sitting in the bank, and yet they are anti-Semitic, anti-Christian, and anti-America. Much of this money comes from the USA, all to the detriment of other schools, colleges, and institutions, and we are not going to allow this unfair situation to happen any longer. How did this Trump-hating judge get these cases? When she rules against us, we will immediately appeal and win. Also, the government will stop the practice of giving many billions of dollars to Harvard, much of which has been given without explanation. It is a long-time commitment to fairness in funding, education, and the Trump administration will not stop until there is victory. Thank you for your attention to this matter there. So President Trump putting that statement out just moments ago. And we do want to now take you out to Harvard, where just moments ago there was students and faculty speaking out. Let's listen in.
Who have become some of my closest and dearest friends on campus. I've seen their ability to study, learn, and contribute used as political leverage. And for all Harvard students, this is a period of great anxiety, fear, and concern, not only for our university, but for our country. The consequences of the recent attacks on Harvard extend well beyond our campus. The research that Harvard has engaged in through decades of partnership with the federal government has not only benefited generations of Americans, but countless others around the world. It is important to emphasize that this collaboration has been far from a gift. Each and every one of the contracts secured by Harvard to conduct this research was done so through a competitive and rigorous application process. To end this partnership will not only prevent innumerable scientific breakthroughs that have the potential to save millions of lives, it also sends a strong message that the United States is no longer interested in investing in science, technology, and innovation. Something that will have adverse consequences, not only for health, but also for national security, economic growth, and the potential of countless young Americans who are passionate about science. The message that has been sent to Americans is strong, but the message that has been sent to the world is perhaps even stronger. By threatening to revoke the ability of Harvard to enroll international students, the federal government has sent a resounding message that they are not welcome in our country. By doing so, not only are they ironically abandoning their self-proclaimed protection of free speech, but they are also going back on a model of immigration that they have championed themselves, bringing the best and brightest to our country. I cannot think of a single group of people in the world who is more intelligent, impressive, and talented than the international students at Harvard. To turn them away from our school and country is deeply harmful to America's interests in a multitude of areas. With less skilled and educated workers, our economy will suffer. And with no international perspectives and friendships, some of the brightest students our country has to offer will be both less connected with the world and less prepared to deal with its complexities. If you ask any Harvard affiliate their position on this issue, I can assure you that it will be non-negotiable. International students are an indispensable part of our student body, and Harvard would not be Harvard without them. But perhaps the most troubling aspect of these attacks is how vindictive and focused they are on Harvard specifically. Through our refusal to comply with the government's demands about who can attend our school and who can't attend, what we can teach and what we can't teach, what we can say and what we can't say, we have been ruthlessly and viciously attacked. Any society where the federal government can dictate down to the last detail how private institutions like churches, businesses, or universities can function is not a free one, and certainly not a democracy. This is why it's so important for Harvard to continue its fight, because the world needs to see that as much as the federal government would like to make an example out of us for our dissent, we will not submit to authoritarianism and will not relinquish our academic freedom. Thank you.
Lawyers for Harvard University appeared in court in Boston today as they challenged the Trump administration's attempt to freeze billions of dollars in federal grants for the school. Back in April, the Trump administration accused Harvard of failing to protect Jewish students and address anti-Semitism on campus. The administration demanded the school change some of its policies in order to keep its federal funding. Harvard refused to comply. In response, President Trump froze more than $2 billion in funds. Harvard claims this violates the university's First Amendment rights. Earlier, professors, students, and alumni rallied in front of the courthouse.
The government wants to tell professors what we can and cannot teach. The government wants to tell professors who we can and cannot teach. The government wants to tell students what they can and cannot learn, what questions they can and cannot ask, who they can and cannot aspire to be.
And earlier this year, the Trump administration unsuccessfully tried to ban international students from enrolling at Harvard. It has also threatened the school's accreditation status over alleged civil rights violations. For more, let's bring in CBS News legal reporter and attorney Katrina Kaufman. Hey, Katrina, great to see you. So first and foremost, federal judge Allison Burroughs, as you know, called some of the Trump administration's arguments against Harvard, quote, mind-boggling. Why? And what else did she say about the matter?
So, Jerika, the judge had a lot of questions, and one thing that she said she's wrestling with is the fact that this federal funding that's been taken away, it impacts medical and scientific grants. And she said, shouldn't you be going lab by lab, grant by grant, to see if there's anti-Semitism going on there? You shouldn't just be blanket taking all of this funding away from the university. And her question was, how do we avoid viewpoint discrimination? Because that, Jerika, is in violation of the First Amendment. Another thing she said she was wrestling with is the fact that the government can just decide what is discrimination, what is racist, and then act on it. Now, the government says that they can take away the funding, they can give it to other universities, that they are not, in fact, obligated to give it to Harvard, that they were in a contract with them. But she definitely seemed skeptical and had a lot of questions for them today.
And we see those pictures of people standing united with Harvard. Harrison Fields, however, spokesman for the White House, said the administration is, quote, confident that Harvard will eventually come around and support the president's vision. A good deal is more than possible, they said. What is the president's vision when it comes to Harvard? What kind of deal is the White House looking for?
Well, we know that the government and Trump made a lot of demands on Harvard in this initial letter they had sent back in April, which Harvard didn't comply with. That ultimately led to these billions of dollars in funding being taken away. But essentially, they want more say in who is teaching at Harvard, who is going to Harvard. They want more viewpoint diversity there, Jerika. They want more oversight of the university. And the university is really worried about the issue of academic freedom. That is a First Amendment right. But we know that there have been talks going on behind the scenes, and that this hearing, this potential ruling from the judge, both sides are hoping that it will give them leverage to reach a settlement here.
Yeah, and a lot of universities, colleges throughout the country watching this, the judge's ruling will have literally major implications for higher education and private institutions in the U.S., regardless of whether she rules in favor or against the Trump administration. So when you think about it, Katrina, explain to our viewers what's at stake here.
I mean, in a way, this is a test case, Jerika. Harvard is the university that has stood up the most strongly to the Trump administration, and everyone is watching to see what happens here, to see what arguments the universities can have strength with, what the government can get away with. And people are concerned that this could have much broader implications, as you were saying. This isn't just about academia. Can the government have a say over other private institutions if it's allowed to make these demands on Harvard University, Jerika?
Yeah, it'll be interesting, too, to see how that impacts enrollment.
Absolutely.
Katrina Kaufman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Hill politics reporter. Julia, good to see you. You know, before we get started, I want to take a listen because Fox News Digital is on Harvard's campus talking to some of the students about everything that's going on. Take a listen.
There's a sort of feeling among both student and faculty to sort of resist the push that we're feeling from the current administration.
There's certainly a lot of political discrimination. You know, if we were counting the conservative faculty here, you know, you could count them all on one hand.
I don't think Harvard should lose its tax exemptions. I think Harvard is one of the best things America does. It's one of the best things America has.
It mustn't lose its tax exemption. that would force it to close its doors.
Okay, so Harvard's fighting this all the way. They say the Trump administration doesn't sound like it's going to give up anytime soon. You know, the administration is making a safety argument here. Where do you see this going?
Well, look, they're making a safety argument. You have the campus pushing back, adamantly denying any accusations of anti-Semitism or trying to tamp down on those a lot of those protests and some of those, anti-Semitic actions we saw coming out of those protests. But I think this really ends up in the courts, Alicia. We are going to see this battle, I think, drawn on, in the long run. Harvard, unlike some of the other Ivy Leagues, like Columbia University, for example, has taken the road of, ultimate resistance. They're essentially showing they are not going to bow down to President Trump in this battle. So I think this continues to be a public relations and legal battle going forward.
Yeah, and the president really going after them where it hurts when it comes to money. Here is the president.
Billions of dollars has been paid to Harvard. How ridiculous is that? Billions. And they have $52 billion as an endowment. They have $52 billion. And this country is paying billions and billions of dollars and then gives student loans and they have to pay back the loans. So Harvard's going to have to change its ways.
So, Juliet, now the president is talking about diverting $3 billion in grant money to trade schools, which is an interesting idea in and of itself. However, I'm just wondering, is that under the purview of the Oval Office, or is it something that Congress takes care of?
Well, I think we'll find that out. I think once again, this goes to the questions about, the legality of all of these moves. And we haven't really been in a situation like this where you have a president sort of trying to divert these funds. We have to remember that Harvard is, of course, a private university. So that's where I think we have a lot of gray area here. But politically, I think that move by the president, or the call for him to at least, call on diverting those funds, is very interesting, because we have seen, the student loan debate really raging on here in the United States, and those who are against that mass student loan debt relief argue that, trade schools are a very good alternative for a lot of, people looking to get a higher education. And you have President Trump also, I think, with this, sending a political message to his own base, not all of his base, but he has a very strong blue collar base in a number of these swing states and across the country, many of whom have gone to trade schools and may look at elite institutions like Harvard as being completely foreign. So I thought that was an interesting message from the president.
Yeah, we're going to have to watch that one, because a lot of ears perked up on that. And before I let you go, I do want to hit on the big, beautiful bill, because Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin says he's pretty sure he can stop it in the Senate as written. Take a listen.
The only number we ever heard about was $1.5 trillion, which sounds like a lot, but it's only $150 billion per year. And this is put in context of the fact that in 2019, we spent $4.4 trillion. This year we'll spend over $7 trillion. I think we have enough to stop the process until the president gets serious about spending reduction and reducing the deficit.
Julia, do you think we're going to see the president back up on Capitol Hill soon?
We very well could. I think we knew that this bill was going to change once it got to the Senate. We know that the Senate obviously have very different constituencies than those very specific House districts. However, I think we're going to be seeing some of the same battle lines emerging. You have Ron Johnson and Rick Scott, for example, fighting for, deficit cuts. They want to, cut more in this bill. But then there's another group of senators, including Senator Susan Collins from Maine, who's facing a pretty uphill reelection battle this year in her home state, who are, very much against anything that could be interpreted as a cut to Medicaid or a threat to Medicaid. So once again, we have these fault lines emerging. At least the president or his team will be making some calls in the days ahead.
Well, it's going to be a very interesting summer, that's for sure. Julia Manchester, good to see you. Thank you.
Lawyers for Harvard and the Trump administration square off in a Boston federal courtroom today. Now, you may remember the government froze more than $2 billion in grants and contracts for the university. The administration claims it did so because Harvard failed to address anti-Semitism on its campus. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman has been following this case. She's digging into the files as we speak and joins us here in studio this morning. Katrina, great to see you. What is Harvard asking the judge to decide, and how unusual of a move is that exactly?
So what Harvard is asking for here, Errol, is summary judgment. They're saying that there are not material facts in dispute here, and that the judge should put a stop to these termination letters, which have taken away the federal funding that Harvard is receiving. And what they've said, Errol, is that there is a clock here, that they want this decided by September 3rd, because that's 120 days from when this started. And they worry that once these funds are fully taken away, they will never get them back. And what they're really arguing here, though, is that the government is violating the First Amendment by trying to impose a viewpoint upon the university, that there is academic freedom. This is a core right. Also, the administration has accused Harvard of violating Title VI, but what Harvard says is they're also violating these Title VI procedures, where before taking away funding, there's supposed to be a process. There's supposed to be notice, a hearing, written materials. So for all of these reasons, Harvard is asking this judge to make a decision very soon, Errol, and also to issue a permanent injunction to stop similar behavior from happening in the future from the administration.
Now, the administration, though, wants universities, not just Harvard, to fall in line to get the message. So how likely is a decision by September, which Harvard is pushing for? That's only a month plus away.
Yeah, I mean, we will have to see what the judge wants to do here. Of course, she could decide to issue summary judgment by the 3rd for either side. They're both asking for this, Errol. Or we could see this go to trial. And it's important to note that the government has a very different perspective here. They say this doesn't even belong in this courtroom, that this is actually a contract dispute. Harvard says it's a constitutional issue. So the government wants this moved to a court in Washington and out of this Boston court entirely.
All right, we'll continue to track this. Thank you so much for breaking it down for us, Katrina.
Donald Trump's latest assault on Harvard isn't about justice, it's about power. Let's not sugarcoat it. This is a president using the federal government to punish a university for not falling in line. He's cutting billions in research funding, threatening to strip visas from international students, and publicly attacking a federal judge. And why? Because Harvard dared to stand its ground. The right-wing media would have you believe this is about anti-Semitism. It's not. That's the cover. A serious issue is being cynically weaponized to justify silencing one of the world's leading academic institutions. Trump isn't trying to fix the problem, he's trying to control the narrative. And if that means gutting education and intimidating judges, so be it. Fox News is cheering. The Daily Wire is cheering. But they're not cheering for justice, they're cheering because Trump is flexing. This is what authoritarianism looks like in real time. A president attacking institutions instead of listening to them. A president treating dissent like betrayal. When Trump calls a federal judge a total disaster because she didn't rule his way, that's not strength. That's desperation. It tells judges everywhere, rule against me and I'll humiliate you. It tells universities, challenge me and I'll take your money. And it tells the country, loyalty is more important than law. The threat to revoke international student visas is especially cruel. These aren't political operatives. They're scholars, researchers, future leaders. Targeting them to make a point is reckless, vindictive, and self-destructive. It undermines America's global standing and turns education into a political bargaining chip. But that's the point. Trump's war on Harvard is a test to see how far he can go before anyone stops him. And if this works, if there's no backlash, he'll know he can do the same to any institution that pushes back. This is not just about Harvard. It's about whether we still believe in the independence of our institutions. Because if presidents can defund, discredit, and intimidate at will, then the idea of checks and balances is a myth. Project 2025 has already laid the groundwork. Replace experts with loyalists. Erase dissent. Centralize power. This moment with Harvard, it's just the beginning. So ask yourself, are we okay with a country where disagreement is punished? Where judges are insulted for doing their jobs? Where education depends on political obedience? Because that's where we're heading. And if we don't push back now, it'll be too late when your school, your community, or your rights are on the line. This isn't about liking Harvard. It's about defending the principle that no president, no matter how loud or vengeful, should have the power to dismantle institutions out of spite. So what do you think? Is this leadership or intimidation in a suit? Tell us in the comments. And if you believe freedom of thought, rule of law, and education matter, don't scroll past. Like, share, speak up, because this is how democracy erodes not with tanks, but with silence.